Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. The paper taped to the freezer said, "Close immediately. Do not let it stay open." Lisa hadn't opened it. Cold air rolled across the tile anyway, fogging the aisle in a slow, white breath. The fluorescent lights hummed above her like insects. She stood there holding a jar of pickles she'd been restocking, staring at the glass doors as they hung wide, silent, innocent. She was alone. The cashier had left an hour ago. No goodbye. Just handed her the apron, pointed at things around the store, said, "Keep the generator running, follow the rules," and walked out into the snowstorm like he'd done this 100 times before. Lisa set the jar down. The freezer hissed. She stepped closer. The cold coming off it wasn't normal cold. It smelled metallic and bitter, like old batteries. Her eyes drifted to the paper again. "Close immediately." Her fingers touched the handle, and she hesitated because she hadn't opened it. A soft clink echoed behind her. Lisa turned. A woman stood at the end of the aisle, yellow coat, short brown hair, smiling too wide. Lisa hadn't heard the bell over the door. "Can I help you?" Lisa asked. The woman didn't answer, just watched her, didn't blink. Lisa turned back to the freezer and pulled the doors shut. The moment they sealed, the bitter smell vanished. The fog thinned like it had never been there. She exhaled. When she looked back down the aisle, the woman was gone. No footsteps. No door chime. Nothing. Lisa swallowed and laughed quietly to herself. Nerves, long day, new place. She picked up the jar of pickles and noticed the tile where the freezer had been fogging. Wet. Muddy footprints leading away from the freezer toward the exit door. The muddy footprints didn't dry. They spread. Lisa followed them with a mop and bucket, the wheels squeaking across tile that still felt faintly damp from the freezer's cold breath. The prints led from the aisle to the exit door, where 3 wooden planks leaned against the wall beside a hammer and a box of nails. She remembered the cashier's voice. "Don't let mud sit on the floor too long." She hadn't thought much of it at the time, just another strange quirk. This place had a lot of those. She wrung the mop and dragged it across the first print. The water turned dark instantly, like ink bleeding into it. The smell rose up, earthy, sour, wrong, not snow, not dirt. Like something that had been buried. Lisa wiped faster. The humming lights seemed louder tonight, the store too quiet otherwise. No customers, no wind against the glass. Just the steady thrum of the generator outside and the soft, wet sound of the mop. She glanced toward the front windows. The glass was beginning to fog. Her stomach tightened. She looked back down. The footprints she'd already cleaned were there again. Fainter, but there. Lisa froze. They weren't just prints. They were forming, thickening. The mud in the bucket rippled. Tiny bubbles broke the surface. Something inside shifted. The mop handle trembled in her grip. A slow, sucking sound came from the bucket, like thick sludge pulling itself upward. Lisa dropped the mop and kicked the bucket over. Dirty water and clumps of mud splashed across the tile. They didn't spread. They gathered, drawing inward, pulling into themselves like something inhaling. The shape rose no higher than her knee, a dark, glistening mound. It pulsed once, twice, and from it a long, wet finger pressed into the tile. Lisa grabbed a handful of paper towels from the counter and threw them over it, then stomped hard, smearing it across the floor in frantic, desperate swipes. She didn't stop until the mud was thin and scattered and her hands shook. When she finally stepped back, panting, the windows were completely fogged over, and something outside dragged its fingers slowly down the glass. Lisa didn't remember the cashier mentioning the windows until they were already gone. Not cracked, not frosted. Gone. The glass had turned into a solid wall of white fog, so thick it swallowed the snowstorm outside. The fluorescent lights reflected back at her in dull, greenish halos. She could see only herself and the aisles behind her, and the long, slow streak sliding downward, like fingers dragging through condensation. Her breath caught. Wipe the windows quickly. Don't let them stay fogged. She dropped the paper towels and grabbed the roll from beneath the register. Her shoes squeaked as she hurried to the glass and pressed the towel against it. The fog resisted. It didn't smear. It thinned just enough to reveal a sliver of the outside. Snow, dark trees, and something standing very still near the generator shed. Lisa blinked. She wiped harder. The shape vanished behind the fog again. Her heart thudded so loud she could hear it in her ears. She wiped in wide, frantic circles, clearing more space. Cold air seemed to leak through the glass as if the window had become porous. Another streak slid down beside her hand. She froze. This one came from the inside. Slow, deliberate, as if something on her side of the glass had just dragged its fingers down. Lisa turned. The store was empty. She swallowed and wiped faster, breath coming shallow. The more she cleared, the more the fog tried to reclaim the glass, seeping inward like smoke. Then she saw them. Smudges. Handprints. All over the window. Small, large. Dozens of them. Pressed from the outside, as if people had been standing there for hours, quietly waiting. Lisa stepped back. The exit door behind her creaked softly as the boards shifted in their nails. A faint metallic scraping echoed above her head. From the vents, she looked up, and the fog on the glass began to thicken again, swallowing the handprints before she could be sure they'd ever been there. The lights didn't flicker. They died. 1 second, the store hummed with that sickly green fluorescence and the low mechanical whir of coolers. And the next, silence swallowed everything. Lisa froze mid-step in the snack aisle, a box of crackers in her hand. The quiet felt wrong, too complete, like the building had been unplugged from the world. Then the cold crept in. She didn't need a manual. She knew what this meant. Generator. Her jaw tightened. The cashier's voice rose in her memory like something dragged up from dark water. Make sure the generator stays running. Don't linger out there at night. He hadn't said why. That bothered her now more than anything. She grabbed the fuel can from behind the counter, pulled her jacket tight, and pried open the back door. A blast of frigid air slapped her in the face, stealing her breath. Snow hissed sideways through the dark like static on a dead channel. The flashlight beam felt insultingly small. The woods were closer than she remembered. Too close. Crunch, crunch. Her boots sank into fresh powder as she crossed the lot. The generator shed squatted near the tree line like it had been shoved there on purpose, like it was an offering. She didn't look at the woods. She kept her eyes on the door handle, on the metal latch, on the one task that mattered. Fuel, pour, go back inside. Something shifted. Not a sound. A movement. Branches bending slowly, deliberately, somewhere to her left. Lisa's hand stopped mid-pour. She listened. Nothing. Then, a faint, heavy displacement of snow. Not footsteps, not walking. More like something adjusting its weight. Her throat tightened. She forced the fuel into the tank, trying to ignore the way her peripheral vision screamed at her to look. She didn't. Because if she saw it, that would make it real. The flashlight trembled in her grip. Its beam swept the trees for half a second, and there, between two trunks, something long and vertical that did not belong there. Then gone. Lisa capped the tank with shaking fingers. She didn't run. She walked. Fast. Because she knew with awful certainty that if she ran, it would run too. Snow crunched behind her once. She didn't turn. The back door never looked so beautiful in her life. She slipped inside, slammed it shut, shoved the bolt across, and leaned against it, chest heaving. A second later, the light snapped back on. The hum returned. The store felt warm again. Safe. Lisa exhaled. Then she looked toward the front windows, and her breath caught in her throat. 5 fresh handprints smeared across the glass from the outside, too high off the ground, and still slowly sliding downward. The knocking started just after midnight. Not loud. Not frantic. Polite. Lisa stood behind the counter with the hammer still in her hand from boarding the door. The vents had been quiet for 10 whole minutes, and the silence felt worse than the noise. Tap, tap, tap. She looked toward the front entrance. Snow blurred the glass. The fog had returned in patches, curling at the corners of the window like breath trying to get in. Don't let customers in at night. Doesn't matter what they say. The cashier had said it so casually she almost forgot. Tap, tap, tap. Then a voice. Soft. Trembling.
Please let me in.
Lisa's stomach tightened. A woman stepped into view outside the door, no coat, hair matted with snow, her face red from the cold, eyes wide and wet.
"He's chasing me. Please, I can't feel my hands."
Lisa hesitated. She scanned the darkness behind the woman. Nothing. Just trees and snow. The woman's shoulders shook, her breath puffed in the freezing air. Lisa remembered the muddy prints, the fog, the freezer. But this was different. This was a person. She stepped toward the door. "Just for a minute," Lisa whispered to herself, sliding the board free from the handle. The woman stopped crying. Too fast. Her face went slack, her lips stretched into a slow, wide smile. Lisa's hand froze on the lock. The woman wasn't shivering anymore. She wasn't breathing. The door clicked open. The woman stepped inside, and the lights flickered. Her jaw opened too far, skin pulling tight along her cheeks as if something inside was pushing outward. Her arms bent backward with a soft pop. Lisa staggered back. The thing tilted its head and whispered in a voice that still sounded almost human.
"You let me in."
Lisa dove behind the counter just as the thing lunged across the tile, its fingers scraping the floor where she'd been standing. Glass jars shattered somewhere in the aisle. Shelves rattled. The creature moved slowly after that, not hunting. Wandering, knocking items over with deliberate care. Lisa covered her mouth, heart slamming in her chest. And above her, the vents began to scrape. The scraping above her wasn't frantic. It was patient. Lisa stayed curled beneath the counter, knees pressed to her chest, listening to the slow metallic drag moving through the ceiling like something crawling inside the bones of the store. The creature she'd let in wandered the aisles, its steps wet and uneven, glass crunched under its feet. Every few seconds it would stop, listening. The vents scraped again, closer. A faint rattle shook the metal grate above the exit door. Lisa's eyes lifted. The vent cover trembled once, twice. Then a thin gray finger slipped through the slats and hooked downward toward the wooden plank nailed across the handle. Her breath caught in her throat. The finger groped blindly for the nail head, scraping wood with a dry, careful patience. The creature in the aisle stopped moving, as if it heard it too. Lisa realized with a creeping horror they weren't trying to get to her. They were trying to undo what she had done. The plank creaked. The nail squealed as it shifted slightly in the wood. Lisa grabbed the hammer beside her and crawled forward on shaking elbows. She stayed low, moving silently across the tile until she reached the door. The finger twitched as her shadow fell over it. She swung. The hammer smashed into the vent cover. The metal dented inward with a loud clang. The finger vanished instantly, yanked back into darkness. The creature shrieked, a high animal sound that rattled the glass jars still left standing. Lisa scrambled back as it began thrashing through the aisles, knocking shelves over in blind fury. Above her, the vents erupted into frantic movement. Scraping, dragging, running, like dozens of things scattering through the ceiling. Lisa pressed herself against the wall, breath shaking. The creature stumbled past her, jerking its head toward the exit door, then toward the ceiling, like it was confused, like the store had changed the rules. Then, slowly, it began to smile again and shuffled toward the freezer. The creature reached the freezer like it had somewhere important to be. Lisa watched from the end of the aisle, pressed flat against the shelving, every muscle locked. Her hands still shook from the hammer strike. The freezer doors stood closed, still, harmless. The creature placed both hands against the glass and pulled them open. Cold air spilled into the aisle in a thick, rolling wave, not the clean chill of refrigeration, but the same bitter, metallic breath she'd smelled before. It rolled low across the tile like fog with weight. The creature stepped back, as if waiting. Lisa's heart dropped into her stomach. Closed the freezer immediately. She didn't move. She couldn't. The air coming out wasn't just cold now, it was changing color, faint, sickly green threads curling through the white fog. The creature turned its head slowly toward her, smiling, waiting. Lisa understood. It wasn't trying to attack her anymore. It was trying to make her break the rule. The fog thickened, the lights above began to flicker. Something moved inside the freezer. Not shelves, not products. Something standing up from the back. Lisa forced herself forward. Each step felt like walking into poison. Her eyes burned and her lungs tightened. She grabbed the door handle and slammed the freezer shut with every ounce of strength she had. The fog snapped away instantly. Silence fell. The creature blinked, confused. Then it let out a low, irritated sound and shuffled backward into the aisle, like a child whose toy had just been taken away. Lisa stared at it, and that's when she noticed the muddy footprints forming again on the tile beneath it, spreading outward, growing thicker. The creature wasn't leaving mud. The store was making it. Morning came like nothing had happened. Sunlight filtered weakly through the front windows. The snowstorm had passed. The fog was gone. The shelves stood upright. The jars were back in place. The tile was clean and dry. Lisa stood in the aisle, turning slowly in a full circle. No broken glass, no muddy footprints, no boards nailed across the doors. The hammer rested neatly beside the register like it had never been touched. Her chest tightened. She walked to the freezer. The paper was still taped to the glass. Close immediately. Do not let it stay open. Her reflection stared back at her. Pale, tired, different. A soft ding echoed from the front door. Lisa froze. She turned. A customer stood just inside. Yellow coat, short brown hair. Smiling too wide. Her stomach dropped. It was the woman from the night before. Perfectly clean, perfectly normal. The woman picked up a basket and began walking the aisles calmly, humming to herself. Lisa backed toward the counter, heart pounding in her ears. Another ding. A man entered, mud on his boots. Smiling. Then another. And another. They walked the aisles quietly, picking up items, whispering to each other in voices too low to understand. Lisa's eyes moved slowly toward the window. Outside near the generator shed, she saw him. The cashier, standing in the snow, watching the store. Not coming in, just watching. His expression was empty, tired. Like he'd done this before. Like he knew. Lisa looked down. Her apron was still tied around her waist, her name written in marker across the pocket. She hadn't written it. A soft voice drifted from the aisle behind her.
You're new.
Lisa turned. The woman in the yellow coat stood there, smiling, holding a jar of pickles. Lisa's breath trembled in her chest. The woman tilted her head slightly and whispered,
Shop smart.
The rest of them smiled wider.
Shop Horrormart.